The heat was already pressing in 110 degrees at the bottom of this Utah slot canyon. I looked up. The sliver of blue sky was 100 feet above me. And standing there, silhouetted against that sky, was my son Jaden. He held the last coil of climbing rope. I'd just watched him pull it up, disconnecting me from our anchor. "I have to do this." "Dad!" His voice was cold, echoing strangely down the sandstone walls. "The company is mine. It always should have been." He tossed the rope. It didn't fall to me. He threw it sideways where it landed 20 feet away, a useless pile in the red dust. Good luck with the rattlesnakes. Then he was gone. The silhouette just turned and walked away, leaving me alone in the crushing silence, leaving me to die. I didn't scream. I didn't panic or beg. The man I was trained to be, the Army Ranger, took over. The father in me, the one who saw a lost boy, just evaporated. My response was clinical. First inventory. I patted down my pockets. 1 pocket knife, keys to my truck in Arizona, half a bottle of water in my hip pack, and the emergency water filter I always carry. Standard procedure. Second environment. The sandstone walls were sheer. No handholds. No way to climb out. The sun was already a hammer. I had maybe 12 hours max before dehydration became critical. I started walking. Not running. Walking. Conserving energy, marking my path with small scratches on the rock. Every action was methodical. Every step was deliberate. This wasn't panic. It was a problem to be solved. And as I walked, the why began to echo louder than my footsteps. This wasn't a sudden impulse. This was planned. I thought back to last week. My office. The smell of sawdust and blueprints. Jaden stormed in, not even knocking. He didn't look like a son asking for help. He looked like a creditor. "I need $10,000, Dad, now." I put down my pen. "10,000, Jaden, I just paid your rent. The $5,000 monthly allowance just hit your account." "This isn't for rent," he said, pacing in front of my desk. "This is an opportunity, a crypto launch. It's guaranteed." "Nothing is guaranteed, son, and the answer is no. We talked about this. You need to get a job." His face turned dark. "A job? Why should I work at some dead-end desk when you're sitting on all this? You just want to control me. You love it." "I'm trying to teach you responsibility." "Responsibility?" He laughed. That bitter, sharp laugh. "You mean control? That $65,000 a year university I chose. That was your choice. That $30,000 car you gave me for graduation, that wasn't a gift. That was leverage. That's all it's ever been. You hold the checkbook so you can hold the strings." At the time, his words had stung. Now, walking through this canyon, they tasted like ash. I finally understood why I'd done it, why I'd kept writing those checks. It wasn't generosity. It was an invisible chain. When my wife, Laura, died, I couldn't face the grief, so I buried it. I channeled all that pain, all that guilt for not being there enough into Jaden. I became terrified of failing him. I couldn't bear to see him want for anything because his wanting felt like my failure. And Jaden, he knew it. He knew that my guilt was a currency, and he spent it relentlessly. Every time I said no, he didn't hear a father teaching a lesson. He heard a psychological weapon being aimed his way, and he responded by aiming his own right back at the guilt I carried over his mother's grave. I stopped walking for a moment, the sun beating down on me. I finally saw the truth. I hadn't been parenting. I'd been funding. I hadn't raised a son. I had cultivated a narcissist. You see, in Jaden's mind, he wasn't just asking for my company. He genuinely believed he was owed it. His sense of entitlement, nurtured by my guilt, had grown so profound that he didn't see me as his father anymore. He saw me as an obstacle, and down here in the bottom of this canyon you remove obstacles. I took a small, careful sip of water. The anger wasn't hot. It was cold. It was clarifying. I put the cap back on my hand, perfectly steady, and I started walking again. I knew what Jaden was doing. As I was making my calculations, I could see his. He wouldn't be panicking. He'd be driving, probably whistling back to the luxury resort in Moab in our air-conditioned rental. He would be calm, methodical. I pictured him pulling over just outside of town, well within cell range. His first call wouldn't be to 911. No, that would come later after he'd built his alibi. His first call would be to his bank. I could almost hear the conversation, his voice smooth and practiced. Hi, I have a quick question about inheritance procedures. Just in case of an emergency, what's the typical timeline for accessing a trust if the primary holder is unavailable? He would sound so concerned, so responsible. Then the masterstroke. He'd open social media. He'd find that selfie we took at the trailhead just hours before, the one where he had his arm slung around my shoulder smiling for the camera while I was just smiling at my son. He'd post it. The caption would be perfect. An amazing day exploring with the best dad in the world. Hope he doesn't wander off too far, haha. A little joke. A perfect alibi. A digital breadcrumb trail leading everyone to believe he was just a loving son, completely unaware that his father was at that very moment being cooked alive by the Utah sun. While he was busy curating his fake grief, I was focused on one thing, a shadow. It was a sliver of darkness on the canyon wall about a mile ahead, a place where the rock seemed to fold in on itself, a potential exit, a seam. It took me almost 2 hours to reach it. 2 hours of moving, slowly rationing my sips of water. The heat was a physical weight. My legs felt like lead. When I finally got there, it wasn't a ramp. It was a narrow chimney, a vertical crack in the sandstone barely wide enough for my shoulders. But it was a way up. I used every bit of my ranger training, back against one wall, feet against the other, shimming, jamming, sliding myself up inch by painful inch. My muscles screamed. The rock scraped my back and elbows raw, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. After what felt like an eternity, I hauled myself over the rim, collapsing onto the flat, sun-baked mesa. I was out of the canyon, but I was still in the middle of nowhere. I was dizzy, my vision blurring at the edges. Dehydration was setting in, and it was setting in fast. I scanned the horizon. Nothing but red rock and shimmering heat. Wait. Far in the distance, maybe 5, maybe 6 miles away, a plume of dust. A vehicle. It was moving parallel to my position. It wasn't coming toward me. I fumbled for my watch. The sun was high, a perfect signal mirror. I angled the crystal face, catching the light, and flashed it toward the dust cloud. 1, 2, 3. Pause. 1, 2, 3. The universal signal. SOS. I kept doing it, my arm trembling with the effort. The dust cloud stopped. It turned. It started moving toward me. Hope is a dangerous thing in a survival situation. It makes you weak. I forced it down and focused on the practical. I stood up slowly, making myself as visible as possible. The Jeep, a battered old backcountry model, rolled to a stop about 20 yards away. A man in his 50s with a weathered face and a geologist's vest got out. He didn't run. He walked toward me with the calm, assessing look of someone who lives out here. He was already holding a gallon jug of water. "You look like hell," he said, his voice gravelly. "I feel like it," I rasped. My throat felt like it was full of sand. He sized me up in a single second. The dehydration, the raw scrapes on my back, the lack of any gear. "Where's your pack? Where's your water?" he asked, already unscrewing the cap and handing me the jug. I took a long, desperate drink before answering. The water was hot from the sun, but it was the best thing I'd ever tasted. "My son," I said, my voice cracking. "He took it. He left me." The man's eyes didn't show shock. They didn't show pity. They just hardened. He looked back at the canyon rim I'd just climbed. "He left you in a slot canyon." "Yes." "That's not abandonment, friend," the man said, his gaze turning to cold, hard steel. He stuck out a calloused hand. "My name's Mark. I run a geology tour company out of Moab. What your son did, that's attempted murder." He understood, instantly. He didn't question it. He saw the scene for exactly what it was. He was a professional, and in that moment he became my witness. The ride in the Jeep was brutal. We weren't on a road. We were bouncing over rocks and through dried-out riverbeds. Mark drove with a focused intensity, handling the terrain like it was an extension of himself. The water from his jug sloshed around in my stomach, and with every bump, the fog of dehydration began to lift, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I was doing a mental inventory, checking off the list of things that had almost killed me, when my hand brushed against the emergency water filter in my pack. The one I always carried, the one I hadn't used because Mark showed up. I pulled it out, just to check, just because a soldier always checks his gear. I held it up to the harsh sunlight. "That's strange," I muttered. Mark glanced over his eyes, never leaving the trail for more than a second. "What's strange?" "My filter." I ran my thumb over the casing. "There's a crack." It was a tiny hairline fracture right near the intake valve, almost invisible. I've dropped this filter a dozen times on construction sites. It's built to withstand a truck. A simple drop in the canyon wouldn't do this. "Let me see," Mark said. I handed it to him. He held it up, squinting at the plastic casing. "Arlo," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "This isn't an accident." He pointed with a dirt-caked fingernail. "Look at the edges. See that white stress mark? This isn't from an impact. This is from pressure. Someone squeezed this thing like in a vise, just enough to break the seal, but not enough to shatter it." He handed it back. "It's useless. It would never hold pressure. You'd have just been sucking air and mud." The world went quiet. The rattling of the Jeep faded. All I could hear was the blood pounding in my temples. This changed everything. This wasn't just leaving me behind in a moment of rage. That was brutal, but this was calculated. This was premeditated. Jaden had planned for my survival skills. He knew I carried this filter. He knew I could find a water source, a puddle, a seep in the rock. So before we even left, probably back at the resort, he had taken my last line of defense and methodically, quietly destroyed it. He wasn't just letting me die. He was making sure I died. The son I had raised, the boy I had felt guilty about, had tried to murder me with all the cold logistical planning of a military operation. The last flicker of the father in me died. The part that was still making excuses, the part that was wondering how I had failed him. It was gone. All that was left was the Ranger. I looked at Mark. My voice was steady, colder than I'd ever heard it. "How long will it take him to get back to the resort?" Mark navigated a sharp turn. "My guess he'll take the main highway. It's the only paved road. It circles all the way around the park boundaries. He'll stop for gas, maybe grab a coffee to look normal. 3 hours, maybe more. He thinks he has all the time in the world." He looked at me, a grim smile playing on his lips. "He doesn't know about this." He jerked the wheel hard to the left, turning onto a trail that was almost invisible, marked only by 2 faded wooden stakes. "This is the old mining trail. It cuts straight through the high desert. We'll be back at that resort in 45 minutes. We were back at the resort in 45 minutes. My shirt was stiff with dried sweat and blood from the climb. The air conditioning in the lobby felt like a different planet. Mark didn't say a word. He just walked with me to my room. I slid the key card and the door clicked open. It was exactly as we'd left it. Jaden's bag was still on his bed, a silent, arrogant testament to his confidence. He was so sure I was never coming back. I walked to the desk, pulled out my phone, and dialed my attorney back in Arizona. Mark stood by the door, his arms crossed, a silent guardian. The phone picked up on the second ring. "Arlo, I wasn't expecting to hear from you. How's the trip?" "Michael," I said, my voice flat. "Activate the package, the one we drafted last week. File it with the court. Effective immediately." There was a pause on the line. "Arlo, that's an extreme step. The trust the new will the power of attorney. It cuts him out completely." "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I said. "File it, now." "Done," Michael said. The transaction was complete. My entire construction empire, my homes, my savings, every dollar I had ever earned was no longer mine. It all belonged to the trust that Jaden now had no part in. I hung up the phone and looked at Mark. "Thank you for what you did." "It's not over," Mark said. He pulled out his own phone and propped it up on the dresser, partially hidden by an ice bucket. He tapped the screen. "Video is rolling. When he gets here, the local sheriff is a good friend of mine. We'll need this." I nodded. I sat down in the armchair, the one facing the door. I took a bottle of water from the mini fridge, twisted the cap, and took a long, slow drink. And then we waited. It was almost 2 hours. 2 hours of complete silence. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I felt nothing. It was the cold, clean calm of a mission underway. I just watched the door. At 6:13 p.m., the key card scraped in the lock. The door opened. Jaden stepped inside. His face was a perfect mask of rehearsed anguish. His eyes were wide, his mouth was slightly open. He was ready to make the phone call, ready to play the part of the grieving son who had lost his father in the wilderness. He took 2 steps into the room, his gaze fixed on the empty bed. "Dad," he practiced, his voice trembling. Then he saw me. He froze. The color drained from his face. It wasn't relief. It wasn't joy. It was the purest terror I have ever seen. He looked at me, then at Mark, then back at me. His mind was racing, trying to compute an impossibility. "Dad," he whispered. This time the tremor was real. How are you here?" I leaned forward, placing my water bottle on the table. "Your drive was a little short, wasn't it, Jaden?" I don't..." He couldn't form a sentence. His eyes darted to the phone on the dresser, then back to me. He was trapped. "I don't understand," he stammered, his hands starting to shake. "I left. I mean, you were... the canyon." "Yes, the canyon," I said. I reached into my pack on the floor and pulled out the cracked water filter. I tossed it onto the coffee table between us. It landed with a hollow plastic clack. "You forgot something." Jaden stared at the filter, and in that instant, his entire demeanor shifted. The terror evaporated, replaced by a desperate, fawning panic. The begging began. "Dad, no, please, it wasn't like that," I panicked. He took a step toward me, his hands outstretched. "I was going to go back, I swear, I got scared, it was a mistake, it was all a horrible mistake." He was crying now. Real tears. But they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of a failed predator. I let him sob. I let the silence hang in the room thick and ugly. "Please, Dad," he wept. "We can fix this. Just tell me what to do. I'll do anything. Please don't do this." I looked at him. The boy I had raised. The man who had tried to murder me. "Do what, Jaden?" I asked, my voice quiet. "It's already done. My lawyer filed the new will an hour ago." Jaden stopped crying. Instantly, the tears just shut off. He looked up, his wet face contorting. "Lawyer, the new will, the trust, the one that cuts you out completely, it's done." The silence that followed was electric. Jaden's face cycled from confusion to disbelief, and then finally to a rage so pure it was terrifying. The mask of the sun was gone. The monster I had funded was finally here. "You old fool!" he roared, his voice cracking. "A lawyer! You think you can do that to me?" I just did. You owe me!" He lunged forward, not at me, but at the table, slamming his fist down. "You owe me for everything you think this company is yours. You built it on her. You built it on the guilt you felt for letting Mom die." I didn't flinch. I just sat there watching the tantrum I had paid for $65,000 a year. "You were never there," he screamed. "You were always gone, always working, and you thought you could fix it by throwing money at me. The car, the tuition. Those weren't gifts. That was blood money. That was your debt." He was pacing now, his face purple spit flying from his mouth. "I deserved that company. I spent my entire life waiting for what was mine. You think I was going to let you just give it away to some charity, to some stranger?" He pointed a shaking finger at me. "I planned it. You hear me? I planned it all. This stupid trip, the canyon, the rope. I even broke that stupid filter in your bag because I knew you'd try to be a hero, and you still survived. You always survive. You're too stubborn to just die." The confession hung in the air, loud and irreversible. He stood there, panting, his chest heaving. The narcissistic rage had burned him out. He looked smaller somehow. Just a 30-year-old boy, furious that his allowance had finally been cut. I didn't say a word. I just looked at him, then I looked at Mark. Mark quietly walked to the dresser. He picked up his phone and tapped the screen to stop the recording. Jaden's eyes followed the movement. The blood drained from his face again as he realized what had just happened. The trap was sprung. That Mark said quietly, slipping the phone into his pocket, was everything we needed. Mark didn't even have to make the call. He'd sent a text a minute after we walked in. Just as Jaden's confession finished echoing in the room, there was a firm knock on the door. Mark opened it. The local sheriff, a man with a face as weathered as the landscape, stepped inside. He didn't look surprised. He just looked tired. He glanced at Jaden, who had collapsed into the chair I'd just left, his face pale and slack. Then he looked at Mark. Mark just held up the phone. "Got it all, friend, full confession. Premeditated attempted murder, including sabotage of survival gear." The sheriff nodded slowly. He walked over to Jaden, who didn't even look up. He just stared at the cracked water filter on the table. The sheriff pulled out his handcuffs. The click of the metal was the loudest sound in the room. "Jaden," the sheriff said, his voice void of emotion, "you're under arrest for the attempted murder of your father." As they pulled him to his feet, Jaden looked at me one last time. His eyes were empty. The monster was gone, and all that was left was a spoiled, terrified child. He didn't say a word. They walked him out of the room, down the hall, and into the desert night. Mark put a hand on my shoulder. "Justice is served, Arlo." I nodded. I looked at the empty room, at the 2 beds, at the half-finished bottle of water on the table. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel satisfied. I just felt cold. It was the absolute sterile cold of a necessary amputation. The limb was gone. The poison was stopped. All that remained was the wound. Weeks later, I was back in my office in Arizona. The smell of sawdust and blueprints was the same, but I was different. A letter arrived. It was from a county jail in Utah. 5 pages handwritten in Jaden's familiar looping script. I read the first few lines. It was all there. The blame, the manipulation, how I had pushed him to it, how my coldness and control had ruined his life, how if I really loved him, I would use my money to get him the best lawyers and make this all go away. I didn't read the rest. I stood up, walked to the large industrial shredder in the corner of the office, and fed all 5 pages into it. The whine of the motor was the only sound. I watched the strips of paper fall like confetti. Then I sat back down at my desk and picked up the phone. "Michael," I said to my attorney, "let's finalize the foundation." An hour later, I was signing the last of the documents. My entire construction empire, my life's work, was now the property of the Laura Foundation. Its new mission funding education and support services for the families of fallen Army Rangers. As I signed my name, I thought about the word family. For years, I had been shackled to that word by guilt. I thought family meant an obligation, a blood debt I owed to the past, a debt to my wife's memory that I could never repay. I thought it meant enduring, absorbing, and enabling. I was wrong. Family isn't something you owe. It's something you build. It's built on respect, on trust, and on shared values. It's not a chain of blood. It's a bond of choice. By trying to hold on to a toxic bloodline, I had almost lost myself. By letting go, I was finally free. The man I had been the father chained by guilt had died in that canyon. The man who walked out was someone new. The final scene is this: 6 months later. I'm standing on a construction site. The desert sun is warm, not brutal. I'm watching a crew raise the first wall of a new community center. It's not my company's project. It's the first project of the Laura Foundation. I'm not the boss here. I'm just watching. I'm not building an empire anymore. I'm building a legacy. And for the first time in 20 years, I felt at peace. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.